If you've spent any amount of time on social lately and felt like everything is starting to look the same, you're not crazy. Feeds are full of safe, beige, copy and paste creative elements. And yeah, a lot of it is generated by AI. So let's ask the uncomfortable question head on. Is AI making us less smart or more lazy? Is it just remixing the past and calling it new? And if marketing, design, photography, and video drift into autopilot, do we end up with work that's bland, recognizable as machine made, and ultimately not effective? I want to take an opposite position. The problem isn't the tool. The problem is whether there's a director in the chair. When a human with taste, curiosity, and guts uses AI, it becomes a force multiplier. When there isn't, it becomes a photocopier. So for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to show you how to stay a director. We'll talk about how AI really works, where it fails, where it shines, and how to build a creative system that uses AI to push the boundaries instead of repeating them. So let's get a simple truth on the table. AI is a prediction machine. It predicts the next word, the next pixel, the next frame based on patterns it has seen before. So if you give it a vague prompt, it averages the internet. And averages are safe. Averages are boring, and averages will never win a pitch, sell a risky idea, or make your audience feel anything at all. But here's the twist that should make every creative perk up. Prediction is not the enemy of originality. Constraint plus prediction is the engine of originality. Jazz isn't random notes, it's a structure bent by a player with taste. Architecture isn't a pile of bricks, it's mathematics shaped by a vision. AI is going to give you average until you inject constraints, taste, and a spiky point of view. When you do, the machine becomes the fastest collaborator you've ever had. So let's talk about the fear that AI is making us lazy. And yeah, absolutely, it can. If you ask it to finish your homework, it will. If you ask it to replace thinking, it's going to try. But the real danger isn't laziness, it's stagnation. When you accept a first draft from a system designed to please, you train your audience to expect less. When you use AI to argue with yourself, to throw weird counterexamples on the table, to stage quick tests that would have taken your team a week, you get sharper. The tool then becomes a gym, not a couch. The question isn't, does AI replace creativity? The question is, do you have a disciplined practice for using it to expand your creative range? Now, here's a better approach. Think like a producer. Direct like a creative director, and let AI do the heavy lifting you shouldn't be doing with your brain. Producers define constraints, who's the audience, what's the promise, what's the tone, and what are the hard boundaries. Creative directors define taste. What will we not do? What must we do? What it should feel like when it works. AI handles exploration of all of those things at ridiculous speed. Mood boards in minutes, 50 typographical pairings, 6 story structure, 3 dozen shot lists, 5 color scripts, 10 alternate hooks. You then combine, curate, and push. Let's make that concrete for design. So here's an old workflow. Hunt references, sketch some options, push pixels, burn half a day. A new workflow? Well, we tell the model exactly what we're not allowed to be. No corporate gradients, no cliche startup blobs, no recycled Memphis patterns unless they serve the story. Then we tell it what must be true. The mark needs to read at 20 pixels. It must hint at hidden letter form. It needs to land on a single color silkscreen. And it must feel, slightly mischievous, not cute. So within those constraints, we ask for 50 micro explorations. Negative space tricks, impossible letter joints, symmetric and asymmetric grids. We're not accepting a logo by AI. We're forcing the system to show us edge cases, and then we art direct the 1% that has a pulse. We pull shapes into Illustrator, fix the math, tune the optical balance by hand. Taste stays humid, speed goes bionic. So let's talk about photography. The laziest use of AI is fake people in fake places doing fake things because it's cheaper than hiring a photographer. The smarter use is pre-production. We generate lighting diagrams that, match the mood board. We previs a set so art department knows what to build. We simulate lenses and focal lengths, to plan the coverage. And we pre-light the hero angle so the crew walks in with confidence. So on shoot day, we shoot real human skin, real metal highlights, real chaos, because the texture, that texture is persuasive in a way that models still struggle to fake. And after the shoot, we use generative fill to remove the mic boom, expand a background, or comp in one extra reflection that we missed, or any other elements that we're missing. The story stays real. The polish borrows superpowers. All right, video production, same approach. If you ask AI to write a video, you're going to get a bland exposition. If you ask it to pose 5 uncomfortable questions your audience can't ignore, you're going to get tension. If you ask it to map 3 structure options, hero's journey, problem solution, or day in the life, you're going to get scaffolds that you can test. We use AI to spit out beat sheets, then we punch them up with lived experiences, client language, and product truth. For boards, we have it draw keyframes to share intent with the DP and the editor. For casting, we mine transcripts of top customer testimonials so our dialogue matches how our buyers actually speak. Again, the system is labor, not voice. All right, let's move on to marketing and strategy. AI is a mirror if you let it be, repeating back your assumptions. So don't ask for confirmation, ask for confrontation. Give me 3 strongest reasons why my campaign will fail with nurses in their 40s. Rewrite my headline as if a skeptical CFO wrote it. Summarize what our most jaded competitor would say about our offer and make it sting. You're going to get friction, and that friction sharpens the work. Then use AI for divergence. Generate 20 hooks, not to pick one, but to test 5. Use it for research, cluster customer reviews into the pain themes so you can target them with creative. Use it to draft, but never to publish. The publishing voice is yours, or it's your brand's, not a model's, okay? Now, let's deal with the myth that AI can't make anything new because it trains on the past, right? Creativity has always been trained on the past. Painters study masters, directors lift shots, writers steal rhythms, What makes something new is the combination plus a point of view plus a risk. AI makes combinations really fast. You bring the point of view and the willingness to risk. If you feed it obvious references, you're going to get deja vu. If you feed it unusual pairings, you're now exploring a space that didn't exist in a mood board before. The novelty is in the edges you push, not in the tool. So is everything going to become recognizable as AI one day? Only if we allow it to. There are true tells, the too smooth hand, the generic lens flare, the sentence that never surprises you. The antidote is to keep one foot in the messy world, record scratchy room tone and leave it under a polished VO. Shoot a real eye blinking in a macro and composite it with a motion graphic. Print the, design, wrinkle it, scan it, and then feed, that texture back into the layout. Ask the model to produce a wrong note on purpose and then keep it if it makes you feel something, Perfect is suspicious. Human is irregular. Use irregularity as a signature. Now, I want to give you a storyline for using AI that protects originality and accelerates production. Think of it as, explore, invent, prove. In the explore phase, we expand the problem. We ask the model for counter narratives, for silent assumptions, for old rules we can break. We ask it to turn the brief into 5 briefs, one tiny, one huge, one taboo, and one absurd, and one for the hater. In the invent phase, we built candidates under constraints. The constraints are not be cool. The constraints are measurable. Must make a CFO nod, must demonstrate a result visually within 3 seconds, must work in grayscale, must be shootable in 1 day, must produce 2 short-form spin-offs. In the prove phase, we test the cheapest to learn. So we preview hooks for a tiny paid audience, run a landing page split with 2 headlines, show 2 posters, to a panel and demand written objections, not compliments. We never ask AI, is this good? We ask the world if it moves them. So let me anchor this thing with a scenario in advertising. Say you're launching a new beverage. The playbook says glossy lifestyle, friends in a backyard, slow pour. AI will happily give you 3,000 versions of that. You're going to look like everybody else. Instead, we tell the model to, the opposite brief. No people, no outdoors, no pours. Give us metaphors for energy. It spits a wall of visual concepts. Kinetic typography exploding from a can, macro condensation like mountain ranges, a camera whipping through glass tunnels of flavor. We pick 3 and pressure test them. Which can we shoot practically? Which reads in, 0.8 seconds in a feed? Which can we adapt to a shelf wobble or a billboard? We then roll. We shoot handheld macro on an ancient lens for texture. We add AI-assisted particles, simulation to punch the moment. And we end with a line that could only come, from the brand's voice. The result feels fresh because the rules were flipped. AI helped us explore blind alleys we wouldn't have drawn, by hand on a Monday morning. We still chose the alley. Okay, let's go back to design again, this time, in relation to packaging. AI can spit a whole shelf full of mockups, but the most useful move is constraint stress. So we force the model to place the brand name at 5 awkward character counts and keep legibility at 3 meters. So we break the palette and ask it to design one variant in a color brand, in a color that the brand would never use. And we study whether the structure still holds. We generate 10 typographical hierarchies and print them at 4 inches tall to see where the eyes land. We ask it to generate the ugliest version possible so we learn where the design breaks. Those are director questions. A generator doesn't ask them, you do. So let's circle back to photography again, this time in a B2B setting. You need hero images of a machine nobody will let you move, right? We'll have AI, spit out photo boards of angles you can shoot from a safe distance. Simulate how polarized light behaves on brushed aluminum and build a lighting tree so that set day is efficient. But the story needs grit. We shoot the operator's hands, the scuffed floor, the heat distortion that makes the air wobble. If a shot needs an extension for a trade ad, we paint that with generative fill, but we keep the fingerprint, literally. Those choices are what make the work persuasive instead of pretty. All right, let's go back to video and go deeper this time. You want a thought leadership piece that isn't yet another talking head? Well, we ask AI to produce 5 rhythm patterns. Quick cuts with hard resets, slow burn with a twist at minute 3, dual narratives, toggling between product and problem, cold open that confuses then clarifies, a mini doc with a practical demo baked in. We pick one and have it, spit shot lists at 3 budget levels. It gives us a bloated version, and a shoestring. We combine them. We ask it to write 5 lines that a skeptic would throw at, one of our claims. So then we film those lines and answer them in the piece. That tension makes people stay. We then use AI to tag the transcript by topic so we can slice short clips later. The model assists, it never leads. All right, let's jump back to marketing and let's deal with copy. You want a tagline? AI is going to regurgitate familiar rhythms. That's fine for warm-ups. The real move is to extract customer phrases that are weird and true. We dump 1,000 call transcripts into analysis and ask for the lines that customers repeated when they were almost ready to buy. Then we ask the model to turn those into lines that would make a rival jealous. So we test the lines in tiny paid placements. The world tells us which one hits. The machine didn't invent the insight, your customers did. The machine helped you just hear it faster. So ethics and authenticity really matter here. AI can clone voices and faces. So should you? Only with permission and disclosure. Audiences forgive polish. They punish deceit. If you use a synthetic VO for a scratch track, say so. If you comp a sky, say so. If you render a product prototype because it isn't built, say so. The point of originality isn't to trick, it's to move. Trust buys you room to experiment again next time. So now let's address the claim that AI just tells you what you want it to hear. And yeah, it often does. That's why you need a red team prompt in your process. So for every concept, ask the model to be the harshest critic in the room. Ask it to write the 1-star review. Ask it to channel the grumpiest Reddit thread. Ask it to detail the legal risks. Ask it to find 10 cliches you've accidentally leaned on. Then use that friction to toughen the idea. You're not outsourcing taste, you're outsourcing bad faith attacks so you can fix holes before you launch. So how do you keep this from devolving into chaos? Well, build a taste stack. A taste stack is your living document of what your brand considers excellent, acceptable, and forbidden. It includes film frames you love, color stories you hate, headline cadences that feel true, archetypes you won't play, and brand promises you refuse to break. So you feed this into the model as context before a single prompt. You also maintain a sworn enemy list of visual and verbal cliches to avoid. The folded arms pose, the fake high fives, the neon gradient blob, the revolutionized headline. The machine will try to drift you toward them. Your taste stack is going to yank it back. All right, now let's talk about measurement because, saying, oh, it feels fresh is lovely until the CFO asks for numbers. If you're using AI to speed exploration, measure speed. If your team generates 8 viable routes in 3 hours instead of 1 route in 2 days, well, that matters, right? If you're using it to craft messaging, measure watch time, saves, replies, and downstream sales. If you're using it for pre-production, measure fewer reshoots and shorter days. If you're using it in post, measure delivery time and consistency. Tools are justified by outcomes, not by opinions. All right, I also want you to have a ritual to fight sameness. I call it the dissonance dose. So once a week, ask AI to combine your brand with a reference that scares you. Your industrial company plus children's book illustration, your financial service plus skateboard zines, your medical device plus brutalist architecture. You're not going to publish the mashup. You're going to steal one tension point that wakes up your next campaign. Maybe it's a color you never use. Maybe it's a narrative, cut that you thought was too aggressive. Maybe it's a typographical scale that feels like it's leaning forward. Dissonance inoculates you against the bland. So will AI ever truly invent something? Well, it already surprises, and surprise is a cousin of invention. So it'll never wake up and decide your brand should take a risk. That's your job. But it'll suggest combinations at a speed that lets you take more calculated risks earlier and with less budget fear. That's what creative leaders have always wanted, more swings without bankrupting the season. So here's the promise I want you to leave with. AI is not a replacement engine. It's a rehearsal studio. It's a stunt double. It's an understudy who knows every line but has no charisma until you step on stage. If you let it write the show, you're going to get a show that feels like everything else. If you direct the show, you get something that feels like you, faster, wider, and bolder than your team could pull off last year. So let me end with a blueprint that you can start using tomorrow. Walk into your next project and declare your human edge up front. What will we say that others won't? What will we risk that they're afraid of? Then set constraints a machine can honor. The campaign must work in 3 seconds, must show proof, not claims, must survive without color, must be shootable in a day, must produce 5 shorts. Feed those constraints plus your taste stack into your AI tools. Use them to explode the space, then immediately converge. Pick 2 routes you hate for good reasons and one you love for a weird reason. Pressure test the weird one, red team it, shoot a micropilot. If the pilot gets a physical reaction, a laugh, a gasp, a nod, you're onto something. If it only gets, polite smiles, kill it and swing again. And when you publish, keep a fingerprint, keep a flaw on purpose, keep a line that sounds slightly offbeat, keep a shot that lingers a half second too long, keep a photo that shows a wrinkle, a scuff, a darting glance. Machines erase the very things that make work, memorable. Directors leave them in. So if you do this, your creatives won't get lazier. They'll get braver. Your design won't get blander. It'll get tighter. Your photography won't look fake. It'll feel more intentional. And your video won't feel like every thought leadership clip in that feed. It'll have a spine. Your marketing won't mirror back what people already believe. It'll challenge them enough to care, then show them proof fast enough to act. That's the point, right? Not to make content that passes some AI detector, not to win a novelty contest, but to move real people to do real things. AI can do 1,000 things for you, but it can't decide for you, who you want to be. That's still your job. Be the producer who sets smart constraints. Be the creative director who refuses cliche. Be the filmmaker who finds soul in small details. Be the marketer who measures honestly and learns fast. Put AI to work like a seasoned crew, efficient, tireless, invisible, and then step into the light with a point of view that no model can predict. If you want a partner who operates this way, human-led, AI-accelerated, and allergic to bland, go to the link in my bio. But whether we work together or not, promise yourself one thing. The next time a prompt hands you something comfortable, ask for the uncomfortable version and give it a shot. That's where the new lives. That's where work gets good. And that's where your audience stops scrolling.